Hi, I'm Jeff Foxworthy, and welcome to Gamekeeper Podcast. If you want to learn more about farming for wildlife and habitat management, then, buddy, you are in the right place. Join the Gamekeeper crew direct from Mossy Oak Land Enhancement Studio as they discuss the latest wildlife and habitat management practices, news, and, of course, hunting. There's no telling what you'll learn, but I'm going to tell you, I bet it's interesting. Enjoy.
All right, we're live in 3, 2, 1.
Here we go, everybody. Once again, West Point, Mississippi, home of Mossy Oak. Look, we got a smile out of Toxie on that one. Dudley, you look like you were so happy today. What's going on with you?
I got to sneak out and go hang out at the nursery. Actually, twice. I went on my way, and then I took our new guest, Jim, to the nursery.
Yeah.
He had a good time.
Guest Jim, they can call him Guest Jim.
Well, we got producer Richie over here.
That's right.
Yeah. So, well, Jim Ronquest, we are so happy to have you here.
Welcome to West Point.
Man, what can I say? I'm honored to finally make it to the Gamekeeper podcast.
Oh, well, we appreciate that.
You've been
He's
around
like you said, Bobby. He's a long-time listener, first-time caller.
That's right.
Look, we have Jim Ronquest, and with a duck call in his mouth, he's a legend.
That's right.
Y'all in bad need of a legend.
He's a waterfowl legend. Lanny, I thought we'd ask him to call on his duck call and turn Merlin on.
Let's turn Merlin on and see how good he is.
Him.
Well, wait a minute. Now, where's Merlin fit into this deal?
Merlin is an app that recognizes whether it's and identifies
a pink warbler or a crow.
So during turkey season, we had a lot of good fun with it,
Yeah,
and Bobby somehow rigged the algorithm in his favor. We still hadn't figured it out.
I think Bobby just sounded the best like a turkey.
I would say Bobby spent a lot of time with Merlin yelping at it before he came in here and chatted.
I don't know about that. So it's a shame Toxie wasn't here that day.
I'm glad I wasn't.
Yeah. He'd have took the gold.
Too complicated for me.
So guys, before we get started, Lanny, what's going on in your world? It's
gamekeeping time, you know what I mean? So everybody's out getting prepared. We're trying to gather up equipment, kind of praying for rain. Got a little bit of spring crops in the ground, but then looking forward to fall. We got waterfowl season.
Duck time.
Duck.
And the Guide's Choice product, we got a new little formulation tweak.
Yeah.
Guys, y'all need to check that out.
Yeah.
And Jim's had experience with it.
I'm in. I just disc a spot up Monday, so.
Yep.
Okay, well,
did
you bring your credit card, Jim?
We can talk.
All right. We love a guest that's a customer.
Yeah. You know what? So, guys, we really, I don't know that's the proper way to refer to these, what we plant for ducks as food plots for ducks, but it's so easy to plant something, and most properties, I say most properties, you've got some area, maybe an old beaver pond or something, that if a guy will just think about it and put in a little effort, he can grow something for
a little
ducks.
elbow grease, getting that water off of there sometimes.
Yeah, if you get it dried up, a little soil disturbance, you can get a lot done pretty quick.
Really can.
Yes.
And you don't have to be in the middle of a prestigious flyway either.
No.
We've
That's
proven that around here.
No doubt about it.
Absolutely. But you still, one rule dominates also. Moist soil plants have to have moisture. So you can't just plant them in super dry soil and maybe get one rain and that's going to suffice. You got to kind of plan for that too. So yeah, it's just if you can keep water on something and then sometime after 4th of July let the water off, it's not hard. It really isn't.
And we love to plant in that soupy looking stuff.
Yep.
But I mean, it works just as good, if not better. Like say you're in the Delta in an ag field.
Absolutely.
Like Jim was saying, he dissed his spot up. If you can
Absolutely.
prepare it properly and get it out before rain,
Yes.
it's going to be jammed
It
up.
loves
when
cultipackers
it's
too.
time
I'll say
when
that.
It's time to flood.
If you can seed it on broken ground and run a cultipacker over it, it'd make all the difference in the world. And really, one good rain in most soils, and you're off to the races.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
So, guys, y'all check that out. The product that we've built for this, and we're so proud of it. It's called Guide's Choice.
Yep.
And it's a really easy to grow.
Oh, really easy.
For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, it is.
And honestly, if you grow, whether you flood or not, it's a great crop for all birds. Turkeys love it. Doves. Oh my goodness, you could have a great dove shoot.
Yeah.
Over it.
Yeah.
But,
So what we're going to talk to Jim. Jim has got a new job.
Yep,
and
a little
with
bit.
new company Drake, what a great brand.
Same job, new place.
Yeah, I mean, we all love Drake products.
Oh, gosh.
I mean,
Drake loves mossy oak. I mean, there is no doubt about that.
yeah, they go together. It's peas and carrots.
It
is what we
has.
say around
Since
here.
the very beginning. Yep.
So I also wanted to ask Jim. He's from over there in Arkansas about some of these. I'm hearing about some of these green tree reservoirs having some issues. You guys are losing red oaks, is my understanding, and the Arkansas guys at Game and Fish, they're trying to figure out some issues. But can you tell us a little bit about what's going on?
A little. Some of it's Mother Nature derived. We've had past 12, 14 years, really serious rains in the springtime. So keeping water on the woods longer and trying to manage the water way back. Game and Fish was trying to manage on some of their WMAs to have early water at the beginning of duck season. And, I've got an old book at home that talks about that didn't hurt red oaks. Well, now we're learning it did. It does.
Yeah.
Yes.
So like Hurricane Lake WMA, don't quote me on the exact numbers here, but there's something like a 700-acre loss of red oaks in Hurricane Lake WMA, which is in the White River bottoms. And they've just done a bunch of work there. They've just done a bunch of restoration work in the South GTR, and they're moving north. And a lot of what they did is taking out a lot of undesirables and a lot of oak trees that are in bad shape, try to let some light in and try to encourage recruitment of red oaks naturally. But all the WMAs in the state of Arkansas are going under kind of a different management structure. One of the ones that's kind of confusing to a lot of folks is Biometa WMA. Most everybody's heard of Biometa. Mm-hmm. So what they're changing, what they set their gates to. Now, Biometa naturally floods. They can't pump it. Mother Nature has to provide the water. But they're putting the boards in, per se, this year to MSL of 178.5, which full pool is like 182. Now, it can go higher than that with a big impulse of rain, but they're trying to keep it where there's not as much water in the woods to try to encourage them willow oaks on the edges to take off and get started.
Right.
So a lot of people don't understand that they're thinking, well, that's all the water we're going to get. Well, not necessarily. If you get a hurricane come up in mid-November and you get a big pulse of rain, well, Biometa will jump up super full, but it'll run back down to that 178.5 with the idea that maybe come springtime, if we could get a dry spring, we could get the water off quicker and go from there, and not have water as early. Like Dudley would probably say, a lot of folks want that early water. However, when's typically the drier times of the year?
Yeah.
Fall. So we've been putting water on our trees too early for too long, and now it's showing on the WMAs.
And keeping it on too long.
Yeah, keeping it on too long. We've talked about this a little bit.
And Arkansas seems to have kind of been the forefront in that. You can Google around and read about, impoundment's one of the key words, overcup oak, but they've been studying that for a while.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting, and that hurts acorn production, which one of the big reasons ducks are going in the woods is to eat acorns. Common to some people's belief. Mouter duck loves a crawl full of acorns. Mm-hmm. So we want to increase that. We want more trees, want more red oak recruitment, because someday who's going to take care of that next forest, or where's that next forest going to come from?
Yeah.
So that's important. That's
when you lose a mature oak tree, you're not going to. It's not like a crop you replant the next year. I mean, you lost something for your lifetime or for a generation or more. So it's so precious. I mean, it's kind of the gamekeeper's philosophy about, call it the life of abundance, but having abundant wildlife. And then the harvest and the hunting part is based on what's best for the place in the long term, great population. So the same thing I think the same philosophy about, flooded timber and duck stuff. You got to do what's best for that forest or in its best interest, and hunt around that. So if it means, if you can't keep doing it every year, if you're going to lose the forest,
right?
That's
crazy. That's absolutely insane to be so caught up in like shooting, hunting that it's more important than actually preserving a tree. So I just applaud the people that are trying to adjust and learn from the past and do these things. Mm-hmm. It's in the best interest of everyone, and especially duck hunting, to preserve those. So yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Dudley can tell us what actually happens when a tree dies from being flooded, because I think you told me it's not that it's waterlogged or too much water actually kills it. It kind of kills itself, right?
It's almost akin to the soil being dry.
Right.
There's so much water in that what is supposed to be like airspace in the soil, because they've got to have that air in the soil to be able to transpire.
Right. Yeah.
You know, like drinking out of a straw.
Right.
But,
hence why they can get oxygen out of moving water better than stagnant water.
right. And so overcup oak is the most what we call wet feet tolerant oak there is. Right. And it's fine for like invertebrates like the leaves that fall and sink. That's good, but ducks don't eat the acorns.
Right.
They prefer those very small red oak acorns that have the more tannins and they last longer when they're in the water.
Then they could just eat them because they can't crack it open like a deer. They're small enough to eat. I have seen wood ducks in Alabama before eat swamp chestnuts choked on them. I can't believe they literally in the back of their throat was not a giant swamp chestnut, but a pretty average size, and they had actually swallowed those acorns.
They'll sure try it in bugs too. That's another thing. You want to have good leaf litter in your woods too, because you take them warm ups in January. They're after them bugs for protein on the flyback to kind of increase eggshells and molt for their feathers. So the more healthy your woods can be, the more healthy your ducks are going to be. Yep. And you send them back in good shape, they're going to have a better job.
We talked about that.
So what was happening is these people are keeping their water on so long that you have a species shift, and you lose all of your red oaks. They're tolerant of flooding and wet feet, just not as tolerant. And so, and I would say in a healthy impoundment, you still have overcups, but they may be in the deepest pools of that particular impoundment. And then
Nuttall.
this is probably a little bit arguable, but then next is Nuttall, then willow oak. The further north you go, you start having pin oak, which is similar to the willow oak. Then water oak, probably then cherry bark, then shumard, in that order, or something.
It's interesting. When I was first explained to it really well, if you take here's permanent water and buckbrush, as you move up the hill, just a little bit of grade can be the difference between Nuttall and willow.
Oh, yeah, just 1 or 2 inches.
Yeah,
exactly.
It takes very little.
Or it may be where a tree fell down a long time ago and left this little hump, and a tree will thrive on that.
If you're walking through the woods, you'll find like a willow oak on a mound in the bottoms. And to your point about the long-term water, not just our WMAs, some of our U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service property on Cache and White River Refuge are dealing with the same thing, and that's all natural water below the dams. So where we're at, we're all below the dams on the Upper White. So there's places where, heck, we've had water on those woods until mid-June, early July.
Sure.
And, the places where they get water movement, they're better, but you get beavers, that micro-topography may plug off a ridge or something, and now you got to deaden it. So,
before we had a levee on the Mississippi River, some of those places were holding water till July and August every year, but they were overcup dominant, and it just depended on the elevation. A lot of people think these alluvial deltas like ours in Mississippi, Louisiana, and Arkansas is completely flat, and that's far from the truth. Traditionally there was a lot of bars, from
point bars, whatnot.
Sure, and so there was actually a lot of elevation. It may have only been 20 feet difference over the whole delta, but that makes a very big difference.
Around here is pretty cool to see. There's all that stuff we have out there. So relatively flat, but it literally, you're right, could be 6 inches in difference in elevation, and it's a completely different look. And you'll see a lot of the white oaks, a lot of swamp chestnuts, especially in our area. But just that little bit of drop, and it's going to go back to Nuttall and overcup, largely some willow, depending on how wet it is. But it doesn't take much, and I guess in that area, that higher ground is just a little better drained.
Sure. And then before we had the levee, everybody knows what a tributary is, where another waterway comes into another one. Back then we had what's called distributaries, from where when the water would rise, they would go into these areas, and then they would leave water standing. So we're really just trying to mimic what happened in the past. And have that ecosystem back by doing these impoundments and flooding and draining. But places like our local refuge, Noxubee National Wildlife Refuge, they have several green tree reservoirs, and it's my understanding they used to flood all of them every year.
Right.
Now that they know about this overcup thing, they're on a cycle.
I think
so they only may flood.
I think every 3 years. And
so that's saving the red oaks and bringing back that ducky, ecosystem that's
So,
needed.
do you think that's quite good question? Because I've got this. We've started that process. It's so much fun. But do you feel like, as long as you don't get caught up in like the hunting and you do it strictly for what's best for the trees, if you don't flood anything until they're dormant, and you have it off immediately, like 1st of February, that you could continue on every year? Or you think we're going to?
I think you probably could.
Yeah.
But the younger the tree is, the more susceptible it is going to be to the flooding. And
Right.
nothing beats planting a tree in a super deep, well-drained site that
Oh,
doesn't
yeah.
flood. I mean,
Right,
anything will grow good there.
Right.
So you're still stunning them a little bit by flooding them.
Yep.
And so it's all about the duration.
And I guess the problem, he's pointed it out on a macro scale over there. If you have already saturated that soil for 2 or 3 months all winter long, if you get some kind of inordinate long-lived like flooded event in like that spring and push that further, they're already so stressed.
Yeah.
Sure. So
And then you got a lot more to go with that. Naturally, the soil saturated, shallow root system in the red oaks, big winds, spring storms, you got more layout. But some of that might encourage recruitment. The big thing you want to keep from happening is that species composition change. If you go from red oak to overcup to hackberry or sugarberry and maple, then
red maple,
then you're getting away from good duck use, good turkey use, good deer use woods.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It all adds up. We got to take care of the resource, or it won't be there to take care of
It's
it.
fascinating.
Amen.
And then, not everybody has multiple impoundments.
No.
So what you're seeing more, everybody wants to flood their duck hole the full season, and I have to remind them, well, you're wanting to plant these little red oaks everywhere. A lot of people are shifting more into this this improved design.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not making this perfectly flat field. They're adding these little undulations
Exactly.
and ridges and pushing up these S-shaped areas. That,
I've learned so much that I
and then
will do
you can
different
plant
now.
trees on those and
Absolutely.
to where they're not really flooded, or you can plant them on the edge.
Or if you're clearing,
You
in my opinion, and I love his comment on this, is a different topic and it's related to it, but what I would do so differently now, we have a big ag field we turn into a duck impoundment, and we can farm that and grow, it's like grow corn and whatever. But even other places that we have, I would go back again and like be sure we had areas of cover. Even, we were so conscious of food.
Right.
And honestly, especially for the greenhead we love so much, he's like he said, he's a green guy. Cover is a critical component. Now they got to eat, and if you have some good hot food, they're going to be there some. But those, I've learned, he can more than I do. But those mallards do not like being out on wide open water. They do not. They'll do it some, but by and large, they're going to get a bite, and they would love to eat where they got some overhead cover. And I was going to ask you too, how important would it be if you had a, say, I don't know, a 20 or 50 or maybe even like 100 acres, if someone had a flooded timber project? If it's all mature timber, would it help to maybe cut a little ahead of time to have some brushy spots, or you think just all mature trees is fine?
No, you need age diversity in your woods. If you go in really good tract woods or good duck woods, there's age diversity there.
Okay.
And there's wider basal areas and tighter basal areas, more thickets. And you think of the reasons ducks are using them areas. They're using them to go in there for food, to eat acorns, chase bugs, pair bond isolation, or temporal reasons, just
Right,
for cover. So
right.
they're using it for all those different things. So if you give them something for all that, you're going to get more duck use. And keep the pressure to a minimum. Try not to run them out of there, go in, shoot them, get out.
I just think it just seems like some of those, especially mallards, they just don't like being exposed to
Now, they'll be out in the wide open.
everything, and there's some kind of extra security from being in the timber. They love it.
They like that overhead cover,
Yeah.
security, temporal cover. A lot of times you'll see them hitting cornfields. People swear by corn, but a lot of times they're in cornfields just simply for the overhead cover.
And that cellulose on that stalk is a good invertebrate.
Mm-hmm. You
Food,
bet,
I
lots
think,
of bugs
too.
out
Yeah.
there. And also, you'll see them in the middle of a wide open, flooded bean field or rice field, too. They'll be out there.
They
but
will. It seems like they'll want to come and go from that.
They
though.
do, yeah.
And that's what people have that I've ever seen, and they have the really fabulous flooded timber or, cover hunting like that. That's so much fun. They have a major food source place, but it's not necessarily where they'd like to stay. But it's like, especially in the Delta and Arkansas, Mississippi, those great places, they'll have standing corn and just leave it, not cut it and flood it. Or, you know, it could be like we have the one place we developed for our little refuge thing here, and we'll have millet growing, but we'll never hunt it. But it's wide open now, and they'll eat, but they don't want to go somewhere else. And then you can kill them in these small holes, have a lot better quality hunt, and not shoot over all of them at the same time.
Amen on that. And they'll always go back and forth like shrub
Yes.
places, you know, beaver deadenings. They like to go hang out in them places too. They use a variety of areas. So if you're fixing up a place, or if it's a private tract, if you can offer them a buffet of sorts of different habitat types and food types, you'll get more duck use on that property.
Same thing we talk about with deer and turkey.
Diversity.
Diversity.
Yeah,
So it's just the red oaks that this is affecting. So
because it's more of an upland.
Yeah, they're not as water tolerant as like an overcut, you know, the other species. So you can go in places on Cache River Refuge. It used to be Potlatch or part of Lower White River before they traded it to Fish and Wildlife. And you can see where they cut it really hard, and it's all come back in sugarberry and red maple. There's not as much of an oak component there. Now, historically, I understand, working with Dr. Mickey Heitmeyer, some of those areas didn't lean heavily to oak anyway, but they leaned more so heavy than what we see now. Then you go to some of the higher ridges in Cache River, that's where you'll find the big stands of nut-alls and willow oaks and whatnot. And especially along the Bayamida Basin, that'll all be typically more nut-all to willow oak.
yeah. Well, I'm glad somebody's paying attention to all this, and it sounds like Arkansas is maybe leading the way in educating people. And,
Game
Well, they have
fish-
so much, this is such a big part of the state.
Yeah,
And their history, not only their, it's commerce there, too.
I think there's more standing timber
Flooded
there than any other.
Sure.
We're fortunate to have the largest contiguous tract of bottomland hardwood left in North America, in the Delta, Arkansas Delta.
That's what I was talking about.
yeah, that's
You know,
what
I
you
can't put it
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
I think the word for that is important. It's a
that's
very
exactly
important
right.
resource
Well,
for the
if
state.
you take the White and Cache River refuges along with some of the state WMAs, they're considered wetlands of international importance. And we're trying to make it happen. There's a lot of confusion amongst duck hunters on how to do that. You know, nobody wants to see a mature red oak get cut when that might be the best thing could happen.
Right.
And somebody said, well, just let natural selection take its place. And I would be all for that. But when we built levees around everything,
you changed the game.
completely changed it.
Yeah.
Now
That's
it's up to us to take care of that forest, so our kids and grandkids have the same opportunities we've had.
Right.
That's right.
So, Jim, I'm just guessing. There's probably leaning up in some hardwood, flooded hardwoods is probably your favorite thing.
It's right up there pretty close.
Yeah. What would be the other thing that
I
might
don't know,
even
that leaning against that same hardwood tree, nothing no more satisfying than killing a long-bearded turkey
Well,
in the same spot.
well, we're talking
you
ducks.
shot-
I mean,
you shot
turkeys,
hit up
obviously.
to a bunch of mouter ducks. I mean, that's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool. That's true.
But yeah, as far as duck hunting goes, standing up against a red oak tree, calling a bunch of ducks on a high blue sky in December with a good wind is right up there with the very top.
Hard to beat.
It's
Yeah,
so
watching
beautiful.
them filter their way in.
Thankfully, duck season and turkey season doesn't happen at the same time.
That's exactly right.
Isn't that the truth?
I mean, I can duck hunt, deer hunt, but if I don't know how to duck hunt, turkey hunt, I just don't know.
So, are you one of these guys that likes to if say there's 20 birds circling you and you're calling to them and you're kind of controlling the whole, you're telling it, and it's hard to do when you've got somebody like Lanny with you. But so, do you like to let half the birds maybe land, and then you're shooting birds rising and birds dropping? Or?
Yeah. I do. If it's just me, back in the guiding days, I even lost customers because I wouldn't call the shot because I was trying to get them all. But I have weaned myself off that, especially with guiding or helping folks out. If you get ducks where you can shoot them, and get out of there. Take the pressure off of them.
Yes.
So, but from a hunting standpoint, we're going to get them all.
Yeah.
And I used to be really, really bad about that. Got buddies that still hate me for it. Won't duck hunt with me anymore. However, that being said, if you got a bunch working and you get a pair in, go and shoot them pair, and let's try to get them and leave them alone.
Yeah.
Get them out of there.
So we've got a lady that's going to join us here in a few minutes. She's from the Jack Miner Bird Banding Foundation, which is we'll learn about that. It's a fascinating story.
Yes.
But I wanted to ask you early on into this, those many times that you're in those hardwoods and the sun's shining, do you see bands on ducks when they're dropping in?
On occasion, you will. Some guys are better at it than others. Some folks got an eye for catching the glare. Or if you watch, if you got a bunch, you talking about ducks coming from a rice field, you'll see like a rice stalk hanging off the back of the leg. Put your eyes on that one. You know that one's got a band on it.
Wow.
That's a pro tip right there.
He's seen a lot of ducks drop in.
That's a dead giveaway right there.
I would say so.
And if you see rice stalks out of both legs, better shoot that one quick. It's either a money band or a jack miner. So get with it.
Wow.
Well, so if you're standing leaning against a tree and you see that shining, you're not saying anything to anybody. You're just keeping your eye on that duck.
Yeah, my eyes on that duck. Pow! Get them, boys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Toxie, what about you? You've killed some bands through the years.
Yeah. Quite a few.
You ever seen one before?
Never knew it ahead of time. No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. What about you, Lanny?
I have noticed one before and actually ended up getting it. So, luckily.
Yeah.
It was a pair of greenheads.
I've
both
seen
of
them.
He was probably hunting with me, and he still never told me to this day.
You know, with Lanny, have you noticed you
You
get
just
a
see
lot
that
of ducks that
one-footed
have
duck.
1 foot?
That's
don't
right.
they?
That's right.
What's up with that?
Or one of them's real skin up.
Well, there's another one too. If you get the seam of the band lined up just right on the knuckle,
It'll come off.
and you get your thumb behind it, and you get your buddies or somebody talking to the guest in the blind, you can get that foot cleaned off pretty quick, and nobody knows the difference.
How many bands have you killed, Jim?
Oh, not that terrible many.
He's not going to say that.
2, 3,
Couple.
4? Oh,
Couple.
come on.
More
now.
than that.
Yeah.
No, I really don't know. I've got several. I've got buddies that's got piles of them. I've been with folks that we've got banned and given away, or other folks took them. I would be afraid to say how many I've seen.
I want to say Neil Hayes may be the luckiest guy. I mean,
he has. But he's taken a lot of people. He actually,
Yeah, he hunts hard too.
for no more bucks than we kill compared to where he hunts, he has either or has been with a lot of people that have shot one. He's even got, there's one space he calls the Silver Slough.
Yep.
Oh, wow.
Because it's like, Bobby, you killed one back in there, I think. You were the day we were hunting with his brother-in-law Lee.
yeah, I was with y'all, but
Yeah, he
Lee,
killed one
I
then.
didn't shoot.
But it was
at
like
the-
4 consecutive hunts. They killed a banded duck out. It's just
That's awesome.
A very small slough, actually.
You know,
A
you can
lot
tell
of cover around it. Though.
It is a lot of cover, yes.
the cool things about bands. If you start paying attention to places that shoot bands consistently, and you think about DNA and long-term migrations of areas that ducks have used since the dawn of time, you'll start seeing that. There's some places that will shoot more bands than others, and my opinion is those are historical little mini flyways, because every little waterway is a highway, is a corridor that ducks travel. So when you start shooting bands year in, year out in them same places, that's ancestral type duck holes. And that's where you can really that's where management really makes a difference. You take an ancestral duck hole and help make it better, you really got something in.
That's what we did. Thank goodness for it.
I've seen grown men who grew up together as best friends not speak for a month over a band argument.
You know, Toxie, you
I never saved them all. I mean, honestly, I never knew to make a big deal out of them.
Yeah.
So I can remember many years ago, Toxie, this was probably 24, 25 years ago, I went with you to Cottonwood. Mm-hmm. And I was, Will Walker, I was just so impressed with him.
Oh, my gosh.
But he was he had talked about his dad killing birds with bands, and that his mother made a necklace out of them, and she would wear them to the Ducks Unlimited, and just a complete necklace. And you know what? I'm sure she was a fine lady, just having to put up with Will.
I grew up going to church with her.
But I was always
Miss
impressed
Gloria.
with that
Miss Gloria.
story, and I'm picturing her, and I bet everybody just drooled at the bands around her neck.
I wouldn't say everybody probably did, but, those of us that duck hunted would have. But that's a pretty cool story. That's like my mom making the Christmas wreath out of turkey feathers. It's so cool.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So going back to Will Walker's mother and all that.
All those bands.
So years
That made an impression on you, Bob.
It did. Well, it did. So years later, I'm duck hunting on the Tom Bigby River with my friend Paige Todd, and I killed a duck with a band. And it's debated. We have debated who killed the duck actually, but I know I killed
I'm sure
the
you
duck.
claimed it.
But anyway, it was a Jack Miner band, and it had a Bible verse on it. Well, I didn't know anything about Jack Miner, and I was fascinated by this. Went home and Googled it, and it's the most unbelievable story ever.
It's a great story.
We're all familiar with the U.S. Fish bands, and and what most people have. But there's this story about how all this got started. Toxie, I don't know if you know it or have heard all of it, but it is the most fascinating thing. So before I introduce Amanda, I want to read. It's only a paragraph, so this won't take very long. But I got to put my glasses on to read it.
Of course.
But this will set the stage for what we're doing. All right. So there's a guy. There was a guy, Jack Miner. He was born in 1865. So now transfer. Think about how long.
So he's not
going to
be on the podcast.
He's not going to be on the podcast. But the life of Jack Miner and his sanctuary for migratory waterfowl is one of the most inspiring stories of man and nature. From humble origins and illiteracy, Jack Miner rose to become an outstanding champion of conservation issues and a leader in raising of public awareness of wildlife conservation. One of his most brilliant inventions was inscribing Bible verses on the bands he placed on Canada geese. When native hunters in the far north recovered these bands, not only did they receive an evangelical message, but they also gained a new respect for the Canada geese. Jack Miner was more than just a public figure. He was a sincere and honest man who applied hard work, common sense, and a deep love of nature and humanity to his everyday life. So this story that we're going to hear from and learn about is just absolutely, it's just fascinating is what it is. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Amanda Everaert. There she is. She's from Canada, eh? And look, this
Not like a Southern guy trying to be a.
Yeah. So okay, I'm gonna back out of the way. But Amanda, can you welcome here? But can you please kind of tell us this story?
Well, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate that. And so Jack, he was a hunter. So he moved actually from Westlake, Ohio, when he was young. His family moved to Canada over to Kingsville, and they started a tile and brick factory. And with them dredging their ponds and everything like that, they decided that he would start placing some geese in his ponds. And so that's how it kind of started the sanctuary, and where we got the idea to have geese and to encourage them to land on his property. From there, he had thousands of geese that would come to the sanctuary, and he decided that he needed to figure out where they were going. So that's where the band started. So he was one of the first people to start banding. We still to this day band our ducks and geese as they come through the sanctuary during the migration festival or migration time. And we keep up with what he was doing and his research and checking to see where they've been acquired from. So most of them are going to be from hunters that will write into us or email us to let us know that they've received one of the bands from Jack Miners.
So, Amanda, I'm going to jump in here. As I've learned the story, and I've read a few books, I was reading out of a book there that Sir Peter Scott had, that was a quote talking about Jack Miner. But my understanding, back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, Jack Miner made a bunch of money making bricks. He was very successful. He had friends like Henry Ford, and he was super successful. But at some point, he looked around and realized that he'd been harvesting all this clay from his properties to build bricks, and he started feeling bad about how the landscape looked because of what his business had done. And that was like a turning point in his life, and he started saying, I'm going to give back, and he started turning those what he had mined into habitat for geese and ducks. Am I right on that, Amanda?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was part of his story in terms of wanting to give back and create what he's stripped from the land and give back so that there was an area for them. But the reason for the sanctuary itself was also due to a hunting accident that fatally killed his brother. And from there, he wanted to make sure that he was a friend to the animals, and as opposed to always an enemy and killing them. So he wanted to give back to the wildlife that he had possibly taken. So it was quite two different kind of realms of it, wanting to give back in terms of depleting the land, and also these monumental issues that had happened or events that had happened in his life.
So as I read in this story about him, he started trying to figure out a way that he could band these birds and get back the information, and he could learn where they were going. But he started, he just felt led to put a Bible verse on these early bands. And one of the first ones that he banded, actually, he let the bird go, and he put a verse, 1 Peter, on there, and he got back a letter from somebody saying, "I'm sorry, I killed your first pet." But he had abbreviated Peter into P. But he learned that people were actually, that when they got these bands, it meant something to them.
Sure.
And the Native Americans, man, I don't mean to tell the whole story here, but
let me tell the whole story.
It's going to.
that they would kill a goose that had one of these bands. Well, they couldn't read it, so they would have to go to somebody that could read English, and then that allowed that person to witness to them.
Wow.
So these birds they
very
referred to them
cool.
as flying missionaries.
Yeah.
Have I got that right, Amanda?
Absolutely. That's just exactly how I tell it.
So in the future, feel free to point out where he's off base too.
Yeah, we do it all the time.
When he
We
misses
love it.
that, we'll let him know really quick. So feel free to.
Yes. So let's go into how he learned more about banding and what all, how the Fish and Wildlife Service learned from what Jack was doing.
So he contracted a bunch of different things to put these bands on himself. He would sit there at night and actually engrave them by hand with his wife, sitting there with a hammer and the actual letters. To this day, we don't do it that way. We have them engraved first, and then we'll put like a specific year on them. So there's only a couple things that we have to do by hand now. We've sped up the process a little bit. But through trial and error, he was one that looked into a bunch of different ways to do things and to try to find the appropriate material that was going to be light enough for the goose, but sturdy enough that was going to withhold years and years of its, being on its leg. And at first, he didn't actually have any Bible verses on them. It wasn't until he didn't see any return of the bands that he decided that he would start putting these Bible verses to encourage people to write into him.
That's interesting.
So our bands now, they come flat. We have to hand roll them. It's a pretty barbaric contraption that we have, but we usually get our summer students to help out with that task since it is a little tedious. But we'll pre-roll them for when we're doing our banding, which is majority in like the September, October time. Put them into like a C shape so that it's just easier for us to clamp. A lot of different organizations have kind of mimicked what we've started and started banding their own geese and ducks. We don't typically put anything on a goose or a duck that would have a band on it already. So we stay away from like the federal programs or any of the American states that have put them on, just because we don't want to interact with their tracking system and their research that they're doing.
So when Jack got started doing this, Jack Miner, it carried on for a long time, and then his sons, it's my understanding, carried on the family tradition, so to speak. And so today, how many ducks and geese on average do y'all band a year now? It's not many.
We don't band as many as we used to. The ducks and geese are getting smarter, and not as many come to the sanctuary as we used to. There's a lot of irrigation ponds and cornfields for them to lay rest in, or golf courses. So attracting them has been a little bit of a challenge for us to have the numbers that we used to. But on a typical year, we still get a few thousand bands on ducks and geese. And it just depends on what season and what's kind of bringing them in. If it's a certain direction of wind that maybe brought in a huge flock that we are able to catch ourselves.
Wow.
We can speak from experience. It's a tough job.
It's not easy.
We've been trying.
Yeah.
It's
And
not easy.
really, last year Bobby hit it pretty hard trying to.
Yeah.
When I couldn't get out there, and it's not easy.
Yeah, we built some trap.
I think we've learned enough to take it on this year.
And we're going to try again, that's for sure.
Yep.
So we might need some pointers.
So these. Go ahead.
I've got a question, Bobby.
Yeah.
Dudley, do you have a question?
So, Amanda, I'm assuming if you're banding them in the same place, they generally use, I'm assuming maybe the Mississippi and Eastern flyways more commonly. I could be wrong about that, so maybe correct me. And also, do you have any stories of bands, that the duck may have flown to Europe or something like that, like a really far-fetched story where you've gotten that band back? Most
of our band recovery is going to be from our area or from Michigan. So they don't usually get too far before they're harvested. We do have like North Carolina and Georgia, sometimes down in Florida. So that's going to be our normal, and then up into like Northern Ontario. So that's kind of the direction that they go in. Once in a while, we'll have one that goes over to Kansas, to Missouri, but it just depends on what kind of storm system has come in, and maybe they got thrown off course. But nothing in Europe, unfortunately.
Okay.
Maybe they don't know what the band is.
Just checking. I've heard some interesting stories. People killed, those Eurasian widgeons that end up in the United States and vice versa. So
Well, sounds like Bobby's was pretty far off.
Yeah,
Mississippi.
So when I researched it, there's a kind of, some of them come to around Decatur, Alabama. There's a kind of a wintering ground there, and
On
then
the Tennessee River.
That's right. And some ducks have kind of pushed off after that
And
a little further south.
did you say what species your duck was?
It was a hen mallard.
a hen mallard.
Yep.
Okay.
I would think that they've done it enough, like with the federal bands, start to see a little bit of philopatry start showing up. Hence, your wintering population around Decatur, Alabama. Or I'm curious about how many birds come back to the Jack Miner Sanctuary each year that have already been banded with a Jack Miner band. Do you see that much?
So we do take record of it. So from what I've seen with our records the last couple years, we get maybe 5 or 6 that will be in the group of those that we're banding again, that already have one of our bands on them. So they're noted that they were caught in whatever year it was, and then just noted for our record keeping. But it's only typically about 5 to 6 ducks and geese that we will do repeats to.
Each year.
So it's a really neat story, guys.
Very
and
neat.
I would encourage you to go to Jack Miner, Google Jack Miner, and there's a lot of old videos that you can watch, black and white videos that tells the story and his friendship with Henry Ford, and it really is fascinating, and it's inspiring because conservation is so important to us, Amanda, and Jack Miner's kind of considered the father of conservation in Canada, is my understanding. And so we're inspired by what other people do to take care of wildlife and the efforts that they go to. So this story, and then tie in the Bible verses, it's just a really, really neat story.
And on top of that, the most coveted waterfowl band amongst waterfowl hunters, whether you're a duck hunter or a goose hunter, it's the unicorn.
Gold standard. Yep.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
It's the unicorn.
It is.
That part I've always known about it. It was like the ultimate, prize.
Well, so, okay, listen to this. Amanda has agreed to give us a few bands that we could give away to some of our listeners.
Oh, wow.
But, guys, I also want to point out that one way you can support the Jack Miner Foundation is you can actually buy a band from them it's got a Bible verse on it. They've got duck bands and goose bands, and you can go. What's the website, Amanda, that the guys could go do this?
So if you go to jackminer.ca or jackminer.com, both will bring you to our brand new website. So we're trying to still encourage people to do their band recoveries through there, and there will be soon our list of all the bands that have been recovered that we have records of.
Oh, yeah, that sounds good. So jackminer.com or jackminer.ca. But guys, so for the next 3 or 4 podcasts, we're going to give away a Jack Miner band, and then Amanda will send it. So that'll be a prized possession. I'll tell you what I did with mine.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
I put it on a silver necklace and gave it to my wife, and she wears it. So it's only got one band. It's not like Miss Walker with a whole.
It's still cool.
But
It's cool
really
that she'll
is.
wear it. Good for her.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, it really
Go
really
Mel.
is. It's exciting. So, Amanda, is there anything else that you need to tell to make this story make complete sense?
No, I think you covered majority of it. We still try to live by Jack's ways. Things have changed a little bit on the sanctuary in terms of no longer do we have any family members that are presently working with us, but we try to still keep up every good deed that he had done throughout the years. Jack passed away in 1944, so it was his family that took over from there. And now we have a great board that continues his legacy and is trying to revamp it and keep it fresh for people to still enjoy. We own over 400 acres, so it's a pretty impressive plot of land that we get to keep and encourage birds of all kinds to visit.
Yeah, it really is.
Everybody's, the world's bombarded with media these days, and people like, money for this, for that. When you do see stuff like, for animal lovers of all forms. We all are animal lovers here, but I just would encourage people listening to choose this as a charity. if you love animals, because you know, the history behind this and the depth of the meaning of it is so pure and so cool from a pioneer like that. I would encourage people to look somewhere like this. You'll never find a lot of people like, where can I send money? I know most of it goes to work for the wildlife. Well, you're never going to get more than this right here. So
yeah, that's right. It's a great story. And look, guys, you can go to the Mossy Oak Go app. 4 or 5 years ago, we did a television show about Jack Miner. And so that's on the Mossy Oak Go app, and you can see how they band them, how they trap them, everything. It's really interesting. Richie, the producer, produced that for us. So,
The producer.
Amanda, you may not even been aware of that.
Jethro Bodine, Hollywood producer.
That's him.
Oh, I saw it. It's great.
You hear that, Richie?
His head swells.
Yeah, it was a cool experience getting
Good job, Richie.
going up there, and the first thing you see all the birds out there on the property, and then it's not just geese and ducks out. There's turkeys out there too.
I'm looking at it right
wow.
now.
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
Hold up just a minute.
Yeah.
I thought that was a strutter I was seeing.
Well, I can say this, guys. The chances of you killing a bird with a Jack Miner
No.
band
We would never. We would never.
Well, it's it's low because they don't get to band, but maybe 300 or 400 or 500 a year. So but if you want one of those bands, you could buy one, and that would help support.
I mean,
their
how many
sanctuary.
people wouldn't love to have that bragging right around their lanyard, calling with their buddies and all? He didn't have to. I mean, they don't sign an agreement where they have to divulge that they bought it, do you? Heck no. I mean, just slip it on there with your other bands.
That's right.
There's a lot of people got a bunch of bands on their lanyard that was done just
I'm
that.
sure they do. And say, you know what? I can't think of a better cause to contribute to be able to brag on it.
Yeah, it would.
That would be A-OK in my book.
Absolutely.
Well, Amanda, thank you for being on here with us. We know you're busy and got things to do, but y'all keep up the good work up there.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Take
Thanks,
care.
Amanda.
Thanks, Amanda.
Great to talk to you.
Thank you so much for what you do.
Bye now.
Jim, you lifelong Arkansas resident. You've been around. Bands mean a lot to hunters.
Bands
don't they?
mean a lot.
They cherish them.
Yes, very much so. I mean, it's there's guys that will wear their bands to Walmart to go shopping on Friday night. I mean, there's
I've seen them wearing them.
there's
too.
people very serious about them.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've hunted with several people that won't take them out until it's time to take pictures after the hunt. But yeah, it's a thing. It's a thing.
Do y'all remember a few years ago, Fred Zink has like as many goose bands as I mean, he's just got
Especially from up there where he hunts near there, and they have the opportunity to shoot quite a few goose bands,
Yes.
especially in the
Right.
park.
That's
But
right.
somebody stole those goose bands from
Oh
him.
no.
Yeah, and
did
I
not know
think they ended up, maybe some of his friends and some others got together, and I think they paid like a $25,000 reward and got those back.
Wow.
Yeah, I think somebody ransomed them for that. I think
Wow.
if I remember the story right.
Bobby loves a good conspiracy story.
No doubt
There's a
about it.
novel. There'll be a novel in that one somewhere.
Chapter 2.
Richie,
Mr. Haney.
In the 90s, my duck camp in Mundy, Mississippi burned to the ground one night. And
Oh wow.
my buddy Tommy Gregory, who was my dad's college roommate, was a member there. And he kept his bands and duck calls on his bedpost in his room. And so the first thing he did, it wasn't about anything else after that fire. He went and dug through the ashes exactly underneath where his bed was and recovered every single one of them.
Wow, it didn't
that's
burn
a
him
good
up.
story.
Wow.
That's a story.
It
right
just
there.
was lucky, or
Yeah, he's lucky it didn't.
maybe
burn him up.
more than luck.
Yeah, that's
So-
exactly right.
well, Dudley, the first duck you killed was banded, wasn't it?
The first duck I ever killed was a banded wood duck.
You
way.
should have quit on the spot.
That's cool.
Hadn't killed one since. Actually, all the old men I grew up hunting with got all of my bands.
How about that?
If
Shame
that
on
makes
them.
sense. Shame. No, I love them, and I probably would have done the same.
That's
So
cool.
it's interesting. I bet a lot of the ducks are banded further north. There's probably not a lot of banded wood ducks. I always talk about the one I killed a banded wood duck right here a mile from the office one time, and had 2 wing bands and it's at Shimola and a leg band. So it had 3 bands, but it was those crimped wings on both sides. And anyway, I caught it. I may be wrong. It's either 9 or 11 days, somewhere right in there. 9 days before it was banded in Auburn, Alabama, which is not north and south, but way east of here.
Yeah, 5 hours driving.
Yeah.
It's a long way.
Well, I mean, I can see why they can cover ground though. I don't know how much. Well, we didn't ask, and you may know how much ground can they with a. You should know this. How much ground can they cover in a day in the winter with a cold front pushing them on down?
I'm not going to be able to speak to exact miles, but some of the telemetry stuff we're doing now on these cell tower backpacks.
Right.
There's proof of a mallard hen leaving Saskatchewan, we'll say in the morning,
Right.
and she hit Benson Lake that evening. And Benson Lake is a lake just south of Stuttgart near the Biomedium
about
WMA.
that. So cross country in a day.
In a day. So speckle bellies especially, there's a bunch of telemetry stuff going on with speckle bellies right now, and some of the movements they make are just unbelievable.
They'll fly at night too sometimes, won't
A
they?
lot of them will. You know, most time migrations happen at night.
Wow.
And that's the cool thing of these cell tower backpacks. They can kind of connect all the time, so they can tell elevation and timing, how fast they're going.
That's amazing.
You can Google it. It's quite amazing.
Life
what they do.
360 for a duck.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, we
pretty
should
cool.
have him back on with somebody who's been doing that research, and because there's nothing like listening to great research.
Yeah.
Oh, there's some really cool stuff out there with Dr. Doug Osborne, Paul Waite. There's some really good stuff.
Yeah, I'll work on that. That would be interesting.
Yeah.
Very.
Yeah. So, Dudley, have you got an Ask Dudley for us today?
I do, and it's another non-traditional Ask Dudley, not from a specific listener, but I get questions all the time about, just what are you looking at? What are you obsessing over? What are you learning from? How do I learn more? And so I just wrote down a few things that I've kind of been following and learning from. A lot of it's like social media, but one of my favorites is the Southern Grasslands Initiative.
Mm-hmm.
It's some type of grassroots group, and they're trying to teach people about prairie species and grasses and wildflowers and how to manage for them, how to find them.
I'm on it.
And
I'm on it
that's
right
a
there.
really
Yeah.
interesting page to follow. And they'll have somebody, video, here's this really rare flower species we
Oh,
found.
man.
And they tell you all about it and its habits. There's another one called Native Habitat Project. My buddy Kyle Liebarger is
he's
on
doing
that.
it now.
He's doing a lot of cool stuff.
Wow.
I've heard of that.
And it's just exposing folks who don't necessarily know that there's so much diversity out there and so much to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Another one of my favorites is the International Oak Society.
Oh yeah.
We
They have a
hosted them one
Facebook
time.
group.
We
You
had
can
them down
join
here.
them. They have a quarterly publication that's full of publications about oaks all over the world.
Dudley hosted them. I guess that was them,
Yeah,
right?
me and my buddy Ryan Russell and you.
That was probably
host-
10 years
hosted
ago.
At
We
least
went to
10
some of
years
the
ago.
places here, but 10 or 12 years ago it was so neat, honestly, but so funny too. They were going through the woods and touring some of these trees. They wanted to see some standard southern species, but some of these hybrids we found, they're they're kind of, I don't know about that and whatever. And they would literally go, and then Dudley would show them, and then they're, oh my gosh, it is what they say. It is a Totten oak. It's a cross. And then they'd be the mom and dad with their kids that were on this vacation to view oak trees, standing there taking their picture with an oak tree like they were at Disney World, standing by Mickey Mouse or something. It was so cool. They love trees so much. And it would take forever to get them. It was like herding cats to get them to go to the next location, because they would literally spend 20, 30 minutes.
Gosh.
And they one of the things we have in the South is a prairie tree was Duran. If you remember, a lot of them were coming down just to see a Duran oak, and they're everywhere around here. But it's really kind of this vein of the country.
We take them for granted.
We do.
But,
that was so
also
neat to see those
interesting-
people that loved oak trees that much.
And none of them were hunters.
None.
And they didn't know who Toxie was. And that whole dynamic was,
Made it
it was
even
really
better.
interesting.
Oh, it was
to
so
see-
cool to watch.
See all of it go down. Another one, and I'm almost done, the Ozark Chinkapin Society.
Yep, heard of that.
They've got a website. They've got a Facebook page, Instagram. We all know about the American chestnut and its story. This is the Ozark Chinkapin. So it's a one-seeded chestnut. We know a lot about the Allegheny chinkapin. It's a shrub. This is a timber form chestnut. It's
Wow.
one-seeded, so
Wow.
it's a chinkapin. it gets the blight. It seems to handle it better than the American chestnut, but they're trying to bring it back. So the Ozarks used to be covered with these things, and it was a way of life for people to go and collect them every fall.
Yep.
And now they've almost disappeared. And so they're trying to bring it back just with making selections. And so they'll find a tree in the woods that seems to be able to handle the blight. And then they'll get the pollen from it and pollinate other chinkapins that they found that are superior. So I recommend y'all go and check them out. Believe the guy that kind of runs it, his name is Steve Bost. But check them out, support them.
So I have to say, it fascinated me. It triggered this. Dr. Harper's talking about fully explaining the 5 stages of successional habitat, and the fourth one was mature like oak timber. That wasn't the final destination, but the species that could prosper and grow in the shade and then take over, that were the tallest, was the 5th and rarely attained anymore, and it was chestnuts. As he named, there was 2 or 3 species. Dudley will remember them all.
Probably beeches.
Yeah, beeches and chestnut. That's right.
successional,
Beeches
yeah.
are still around, actually.
The climax species
Yeah.
is what they
So
call
that's
that.
what you'll end up with. He said typically 150 years or so.
I heard it. I thought that was so interesting.
It was fascinating.
You know, you
Yeah.
don't think
That
about
explains
it that
a
far.
lot.
It's the only tree, and we're shifting to chestnuts now. And
Yeah, but
those
they
are-
got
the-
obliterated by
the
this
chestnut
blight.
was the only tree that could like grow faster than a sycamore or a tulip poplar. You know how fast a tulip poplar grows. I mean, they bypassed the oaks. Well, those American chestnuts in the
Unbelievable.
woods that
It's
were
such
it's big around as this table.
the most majestic, cool tree. I mean, maybe even over oaks, and then we lost them all, pretty much. And I applaud them. You know, you can actually go to the Chestnut Foundation and buy.
Yeah, the American Chestnut Foundation.
And they'll grow just like American chestnut,
Yeah.
but they're blight resistant.
We need to do a podcast with the Ozark chinkapin folks
Yes.
and the
Yeah.
American chestnut
Absolutely.
We need to
set
grow
that up.
some here. We're in the range.
folks. Yeah. We donated
yeah.
a bunch of tree tubes to them several years ago. But yeah, so they're in the Ozarks, but you can also find them in pockets in other places as well.
Yeah, I can see them here.
There's one near Oxford, Mississippi on private land that they've discovered.
How about that?
I got to have one.
So
There you go.
anyway,
No,
That's
that's
it.
good. That it?
that's it.
Before we close this thing out, Jim, tell us about what you're doing with Drake and,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
please.
yeah, absolutely.
Oh, man.
I'm
Yeah,
excited.
Cool, thanks. Working with folks at Drake Waterfowl, and it's not just waterfowl, as y'all know. We're non-typical big game turkey, old time turkey logo. We're into a little bit of everything. Drake Performance Fishing. I get to be there. They call me the VP of Development, and that's pretty easy for me. It's just an opportunity to go develop friendships and relationships with folks around the country. Talk with some of the product development guys about things that you always can make things better. I don't care who you are or what you do.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Every day.
So I get to be a part of all that and just hopefully make new friends all around the country and bring people the benefits of being a part of the Drake family.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
That sounds a
And
lot
they
about-
could not get a better representative for that.
No
I
doubt
promise.
about
Thank you for that.
It's just it just is what it is. They're wise to do so, and we have been a partner with them since the first year they ever started
one.
too.
That's right.
Up and down, and just like family members, we've had our ins and outs, but we are with them stronger than ever, and they have proved over time to be a most valuable partner with Mossy Oak. So
It's a great brand. I've got a
Yes,
wide
it-
variety
yes.
of Drake products, from
yeah.
casual wear.
we're
to-
in the wheelhouse of Drake's, brand
Oh, yeah.
appeal and following and all right down through here. They spend an unusual amount in that part of the country, but it's bigger. It's way bigger than just waterfowl now. They carry casual apparel at the golf shop.
Yeah.
Well, good for you. I'm glad that you're back wearing Bottomland.
Man, I'm proud to be back wearing bottom.
Better
That's
than bottom
right.
land,
That's
baby.
right.
No
Good
doubt
at
about
it.
that.
And we really hit it off at the nursery. Had a good time.
Yeah,
he
that was awesome.
He is a true tree nerd.
That's what I was gonna say.
I use that term sparingly. It's a term of endearment and looking up to someone to say that. I want to say it. Dudley's the ultimate tree nerd for us, but I would say he is definitely in the tree nerd club.
Sure.
Blew me away. I was expecting
Yes.
to talk about duck calls.
Absolutely.
More about trees and anything.
Yep.
That was great.
Oh, well, thanks.
So, that's a complimentary nerd.
That's right.
Yeah, well, look, I've got a trivia question I want to
See,
ask you.
I've been listening to these podcasts. I've been scared to death of this all week.
Well, so this is really easy. And look, I think Amanda, are you still there, Amanda?
Yes, I'm still here.
I knew that.
Okay, well, you can join in on this. Okay, I'm going to say this. Jim, if you don't know the answer to this,
I'll defer to her
go
immediately.
to Amanda.
Phone a
She-
friend.
We can phone a friend.
Okay. All right. So here's the question, and this one
boy.
kind of gets under my skin.
Oh.
So this is a
Uh-oh.
chance for us to.
Did Asif write this one too?
Asif did not write
Okay, I
this
didn't
one.
want
Okay.
none of the
so,
shack.
so Jack Miner loved and is forever tied to a certain species of geese. I'm not going to ask you. Everybody knows what we're talking about, and we all love to hear the honks and the grunts of these geese. But I'm going to ask you, what is the correct way to, if you see a flock of these birds, is it A, there are some Canadian geese, or is it B, there are some Canada geese?
That would be B, Alex, for 2,500.
That is exactly right. They are Canada geese, no matter how many of them there are.
That's right.
Canadians are hockey players.
That's right. Or Amanda working at
She's a
Jack
Canadian.
Miner Bird Sanctuary.
Yeah, but that's right.
That people that are really big into Canada goose hunting, that drives them crazy.
It does. I've actually had that happen when I said Canadian, and I've got tongue lashed.
It's not cool.
It's not cool.
I would like to see somebody tongue lash you. I don't think I've ever seen that.
Was he playing for did we have a guest?
Yes. Oh, thank
Not
you.
even gonna talk about it?
No,
Bobby.
look, and I hope somebody isn't pulling the wool over my eyes.
no.
But
We got another name.
We're playing for G Unit 2121. Now I don't know what I don't know what a G unit is. So.
You might have to look that up in the Urban
Yeah,
Dictionary.
you can use your little.
I think this one's
app here.
okay, but G Unit, you just won. We won a subscription to the Gamekeepers magazine. For
Awesome.
A year, so,
Go G
so
unit.
there you go.
It's the gamekeeper unit.
Yeah,
That's what it was.
There, what it was.
Very cool.
You know, Jim, I figured you would know this one. I felt like it was an easy one, but I felt like we might educate somebody.
He
with
didn't
that
even
one.
sweat over that. That was,
No.
you got to get dig deeper.
I was glad it was something like that. I thought, "Ooh, man, what these guys going to throw at me?"
Yeah.
Yeah, and look, guys, the summer issue of the Gamekeeper
It's
magazine is probably hitting mailboxes right now, so y'all keep an eye
so
out for
good.
it. And if you don't subscribe, you ought to do it
Mm-hmm.
for sure, or go to Tractor Supply, Walmart, Bass Pro, and pick one up. So. I think that's it. Lanny, you got anything else to add?
I'm
Toxie, I know we.
Now's the
I
time.
apologize.
Hey, now's the time to prepare your platter for the winter,
That's right.
folks. Right now, you got actually in the South. You've got until I always say Labor Day's the cutoff. You can still take God's choice out till late August, but now's the time to start if you hadn't, and set the table for a winter time.
You bet. If you think duck season's a long way off, you're behind.
Oh
That's
my
exactly
gosh,
right.
ittle be here before you know it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Jim, it's so good to see your smiling face sitting there. Thank you for
Absolutely.
being there.
Thank y'all for
being
having
here.
me.
Yeah,
Thank
this
you,
was a
sir.
fun one.
Yeah,
It was a great
it sure was. Well, say goodbye, Dudley.
Goodbye, Dudley.
Get us out of here, producer man.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Gamekeeper Podcast. And be sure to tune in again. Subscribe to Gamekeeper Farming for Wildlife magazine and don't miss the Mossy Oak Properties Fistful of Dirt podcast with my good buddy, Ronnie Cuz Strickland.